Hey guys, it's Austin. I'm going to do another video on Lake the Ozarks bass fishing, and this is going to be all about the pre-spawn. So the pre-spawn is a big transitional period. I'm going to talk about why the fish are beginning to move, where they're moving, how to find them, and ultimately how to catch them. So I'll quickly define what I call pre-spawn fishing, and that is when the water nears 50 degrees, but most importantly, the length of day starts to increase. I think sometimes people get too caught up on water temperature during the pre-spawn and transitional period, but it is important. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I think the warmer water can help speed things up and make them bite a little bit better. But the biggest constant, the biggest thing that really gets them moving is the length of daylight. That is something that does not change from year to year. For instance, this year we had the really cold snap. The lake actually froze over. You could say the water temperature might be a little bit lower than the same time, historically, but the fish may still be wanting to move up because their biological clock, the length of day, is increasing and telling them that hey, it's going to be time to start the transition and pushing forward into the shallower areas to get ready to spawn. As the fish are coming out of their winter haunts, their winter patterns, they are going to start feeding up. They're going to be eating pretty heavily, trying to gain fat, gain energy that they're going to then use when they spawn. So now is a good time to catch a fish, that's arguably at one of the heaviest weights of the year, and it can be a lot of fun to fish. So I'll start just kind of by very generally breaking down the lake in sections again, like I did in my channel swing video, but I'll just kind of reiterate this for the pre-spawn. So on the western portion of the lake, you have the Osage River. This area is generally, like I've talked about in the past, a little bit more stained water, and stained water will actually heat up a little bit quicker than like very clear water. The sun heats it up just a little bit faster. Down here in the Nyanguas, you have some springs that feed in here, so this water is also a little bit warmer than kind of the rest of the lake. We'll go up here to the lower end of the lake by the dam. This is going to be your cleanest and usually the coldest water coming out of the winter and into the pre-spawn. Same thing with the Gravois, very clean water up through here. And then you have your mid-lake section. We'll just count that kind of below the bridge here. Mid-lake is kind of a mashup between the river and your lower end of the lake, but you also cannot forget about the Glaze. It's kind of its own little river system. This usually gets pretty dirty in the springtime with a lot of rain, like runoff gets in here, get a lot of debris and stuff sometimes. But it's kind of its own thing, and it's usually a little bit murkier staying the further back you go compared to like your mid-lake section here. All right, I'll pick a few pockets, coves, creeks across the lake, and I will start breaking them down and show you how I go about it. So the first thing I'm going to do during a transitional period is look where the fish currently should be and then where they're heading. The first portion is a little bit subjective. Depends what part of the pre-spawn you're in. If you're coming when the water's at 55 degrees, or if you're showing up when the water is, still right at 50 degrees, coming out of the 40s, they're still kind of more in the winter pattern. So for the sake of it, we'll just pretend that they are out here at their winter pattern still basically, and it's just the beginning of pre-spawn. So they're going to be out here. You got a nice kind of rounded point. You got a bluff end over here. You have a flat underwater point, and you have your creek channel that intersects with your main river channel. So these are great areas for fish to be out during the winter time. You follow your creek channel in. You've got some nice creek channel banks. You're going to have big busted up rock here. So essentially what I'm going to do is just, you're going to follow your good stopping points on the way into these flatter areas with pea gravel, and that is basically going to be your channel banks, and secondary points for the most part is the biggest thing you're going to be looking at. These channel banks, something I want to talk about is you have bigger busted up rock. Here you have a little bit flatter contour lines that come out. There's a nice dock kind of right on the edge of your butted up lines, and your flatter lines could indicate a nice rock transition. But on these rock banks, you need to start thinking about crawfish a lot more. As the water gets to about that 50-degree mark, your crawfish will start to become a lot more active. They've kind of been in the crevices and the mud, being a lot more inactive throughout the winter, but they're going to start their mating ritual. And after they mate, they end up losing their outer shell, which is more of like dark orange, green pumpkinish type color. And it will actually, during the molting process, it will become like a bright orange or a brighter red color and become an easy target for the bass. So as the water is warming up and the sun, say is beating on these rock banks like this, look for the bass to push up shallower and start eating those crawfish. And that's a good time for you to pick them off with spinner baits, jigs, A-rigs, rock crawlers. You can throw all that stuff right up on the bank, and then just start bringing it out, and you get your bite a lot of times in the first couple feet. But that's not to say that the fish will not also be suspended off a little bit deeper, but you can really start focusing on catching them a lot shallower up. So following your creek channel down, fish are kind of going to use as a highway, and you stop secondary points and stuff. Some fish might slide into this pocket and end up spawning here eventually, but they're going to kind of hang out on these deeper areas until the water gets a lot closer to the spawning temperature. So just kind of working your way down, that's what I'm going to be looking for is any type of change, whether it's a rock transition. I'm looking for brush piles. I'm looking for rock piles, hard spots on the bottom. Anything that is a good stopping point for these fish as they're working their way back in. Now, when you get back to these flatter areas, you want to keep in mind how close you are to something that has deep water easily available. A lot of times the males, when it does get closer to actual spawning time, the males will push up first and start looking for bedding areas and cleaning off beds and stuff like that. The females are going to hang out closer to the deeper water and kind of wait until it's pretty much go time, and then they're going to slide up, spawn, and then they're going to rush back out to the deeper water. They usually don't hang around the shallow water very long. So the deep water is something that's very key to have close by, as kind of a staging area. And that is oftentimes secondary points like this or this, leading into your little spawn pockets. Another good reason to have the deep water close by is spring's a very volatile season. You can have a large warming trend that can, have 70-degree weather for a week and a half, and then all of a sudden you get a massive cold front with a snowstorm. And that is something that allows the fish to easily slide back out to the little bit deeper water, and they're not so affected by the rapid temperature decline in the real shallow water, like when a big cold front hits. All right, back now, we will go over here to the North Shore area, and we'll pick a big creek here. So we'll use this one as an example. This is a very large creek. Going to do the same thing, which is sort of subjective to what time of the year or portion of the pre-spawn you're in. Start where the fish are, and then where are they heading. So eventually the fish are going to be heading in the back of these flatter little pockets looking for the pea gravel banks, but there's obviously a lot more room in this cove. It's a lot bigger than the one we were just looking at, so there's a lot more places for them to winter. And the best thing you can do is start to break these down into sections, which would be I've talked about before in other videos. Say you break it down into the last third, and then like the middle, and then the beginning third. So I would start there. Just say, the water's a little bit cooler. I'm going to start a little bit closer to the main lake probably, and then slowly work my way in. I'm looking for the same thing, secondary points, the channel banks. I'm looking for brush piles on them. I'm looking for hard spots, rock piles, anything that's different, anything that can help signify a change. Something I do still want to talk about is wind. Wind is still a big portion of this. Crawfish, yes, are going to become a bigger part of the diet, but shad is still, a large part of the diet. So the wind can help position the shad. If say I'm fishing this creek here, I'm gonna hopefully be looking for like a wind coming out of the south, and I'm gonna focus on some of these secondary points in through here, and with the wind right on there, and see if that helps the bite. That can help position the shad on there. And with your moving baits, it can help break up your outline a little bit with your rock crawlers, spinner baits, things like that, and help you get some more bites. So that's what I'm going to look for, but you're generally just going to break this up, into sections and fish it, and then see if you're getting bites. If you're getting bites in like the middle section, well then I'm going to pull out of this cove, and I'm going to go over to one that's similar like this, and I'm going to fish the middle section, middle section, say on secondary points. Well, then I've got a little bit of a pattern going. And then if I can fine tune that even better with, brush piles or docks on them, or the way the wind's coming in and hitting something specific, that's going to help make the lake just fish a lot smaller, because on these transitional periods and these big creeks and coves and stuff like that, where you can have fish wintering all over the place, just anything you can do to help narrow that down. So every fish you catch, maybe let that tell you a little bit of a story about what's going on or about what you need to be doing. One other quick note here. So these pockets here, they are facing the south. This is what they call the North Shore. These here on the southern portion are facing the north. They generally say that these southern facing pockets warm up a little bit quicker. That is basically due to two things, which is sunlight. The sun is not as high yet in the sky, so this is going to receive a little bit more sunlight and less shade, especially on little cuts like this that run east and west. And number two is the wind. So they're saying, the north winds coming in that are cold, these are a little bit more protected than these pockets here, where the cold north wind, and it's going to be blowing all that water in from the main lake too, and kind of keeping these a little bit cooler. So that's just kind of for you to decide. I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but that's just something I thought I'd throw out there. All right, so we'll go down here to kind of a mid-lake cove. This one's not as big. So same thing, where the fish are, where the fish going. We know where they're going for sure, which is back towards the spawn pockets. And then where they are, it's just a little bit subjective to exactly what point of the pre-spawn you are in. But for the case of this, we'll say that we are just coming back out of the winter patterns. So again, starting the main lake. I'm going to be looking for rock changes through here, looking for brush piles. This is a dock that's all here by itself. That looks good. Follow the creek channel. You got a nice creek channel bank here, and then it kind of swings back over and works its way in. So you got a nice secondary point with a boat ramp. Be looking for brush piles, rock piles, things like that along this bank as well, leading into this other spawn pocket. So don't forget about that. And another thing I want to talk about while I'm thinking about it right now is using Google Earth to your advantage. So this is the same pocket that we were just looking at, and you can use Google Earth. You have to download this version. It's free, but you can go and click this little clock up here and go back in time. This is a date from March of 2012, the imagery. So you can zoom in here and you can see the rock changes. You can see things like that. So if you go down the bank, secondary point, doesn't look too crazy on any rock changes like that. Here's your boat ramp you're looking at. These are nice hard spots. You usually have a little drop off where the pad was poured, and sometimes things from boat motors blowing it out, power loading, but that just depends who used it, how much it's been used. If you go down the bank some more, you'll see, looks like a pretty good rock change here. So you got like your channel bank coming along this way, and then you have a little bit finer rock leading up into this little pocket. And this could even be a little spot where they spawn. So I would probably spend some time on this channel bank with this rock change. So don't forget about Google Earth. That can save you a ton of time on the water. You don't have to idle in, idle out all the time to check things out. You can check it out right from home when you have plenty of time, so you can maximize your time out on the water. All right, I'll come and do one more over here in the glaze. And let's talk about some spring runoff. So like these two little pockets here, little creeks, you have them coming into the back of these coves into the shallower water. This one's got two little creeks. This one just has one. So these are good areas to look at. Like I said, when you have a nice warm spring rain that's coming into the lake that's substantially warmer than the current water temperature, that can draw the bait fish back in there to get the nutrients that are coming, washing out of the water. And then the bass are also going to follow to get the shad, and then just a little bit of that warmer water seems to kind of wake everything up a little bit. So that's something you can keep in mind. As far as these like two pockets go, looking for the same thing of where the fish are starting, where they're going to end up, it's pretty obvious, at this point. You're looking for the shallow pea gravel banks. This is nice little like secondary point up inside here. This one's got a little secondary point here leading on the outside edge of these little spawn pockets and these docks. These docks, say, have brush piles or anything underneath them. These are great little spots for these bass to hang out underneath before they might slide all the way up in here to spawn. Or like on these flatter banks, just in general with these docks, the fish, they can just spawn right up in here under the walkways, things like that when it comes time. But I'll go over kind of the spawning stuff in a whole other video. So right now we'll just focus on the pre-spawn. But the final thing I want to leave off with before I get into the baits is just don't stop moving during the spring. It's a transition period. The fish are constantly on the move. They're working their way in towards the backs of these creeks and coves into the flatter areas. And the weather can shift them around. You can draw them in. It can make them slide back out a little bit into deeper water. So just don't get too hung up in like one area. If it's not working for you, like say you're fishing the glaze and man, it's just not working. Don't be afraid to run out of the glaze, run into mid lake, run up past the toll bridge into a different little section of the lake and see what's happening there. See if you can get something figured out there. Sometimes it's just, one section of the lake might not be as far ahead as the other. And if you do travel to another place, say you were catching them in the glaze and then you come out and go try something else up in the mid lake or lower end of the lake, they might not be as far along. So just keep that in mind and keep your options open and just try and cover as much water as you can until you really get a good pattern dialed in. And then you can just fish high percentage spots and make the lake fish as small as possible. So hope this helps, and I'll get into some baits of what I like to use. All right, so now I'll go over some baits real quick, things I like to use during the pre-spawn. So early on, still a big fan of the A-rig. You can cover a lot of water with it and catch some really big fish. I normally pair that with some Kitech swim baits. Here's like a 3.8. This is the shad color. I like this color a lot. If you do get into a little bit more, watercolor, you can go with white. It's always a good one. Here's actually, I just got these. I've never thrown these before. These are Tackle HD swimmers. This one kind of looks like a gizzard shad a little bit, the colors. So I'll be excited to try these and see how they do. But generally like a 3.8 works good. As you get a little bit further along, water temperature gets a little bit warmer. Sometimes I jump up to the 4.3s and the 4.8s to try and get a little bit bigger bite. But I feel like the 3.8s and stuff are the most consistent at getting bites. You can also just throw your swim bait on, single swim bait style. Throw it over brush piles, down channel banks, secondary points with wind blowing on it. Basically going to target the same thing with the single swim bait as I would with an A-rig. Another big lure that comes into play is a spinner bait. You can throw this, shallow around laydowns and stuff. You can throw it right up on the bank, like I was talking about, almost on shore, on like the busted up rock banks, and then drag this out, and you usually get bit in the first couple feet. This is the red blade on it. I like this when water gets a little bit more stained in the springtime. And then some chartreuse. There's tons of different combinations with blade combinations and colors. I think Ryan actually has a video on spinner baits if you want to check that out. Another good thing to throw is a jig. This is a finesse jig, just a little green pumpkin, or peanut butter jelly, sorry, with a green pumpkin Cracker Gator ring crawl. I normally throw the ring crawl on until you get about mid 50s, and then I swap it out for something with a little more action, like a Pack a Chunk or a Strike King Rage Tail. And then I will oftentimes start straying away from the finesse jig and just throw a regular jig with a little bit bigger profile when it gets closer to the spawn. Something else that's real popular, cover some good water with, catch big fish, are rock crawlers. So you've got, this is like red bug, I think, and this is something similar to that, but it's more transparent. You can see through it a lot better. This is, your typical red bait. These run like 12 feet deep, I think. Do a lot of paralleling on the busted up rocks with these. Like, let it come down, and if you are digging in some rock and you feel it come over a rock, like pause it and then kind of let it float up a little bit, and you can get bit on that. Had numerous fish where you're actually reeling, you get stuck on a rock and you go to pop it off, you kind of pop your line like a bow and arrow with your rod a little bit, and it comes off, and then a big fish will come and eat it. This is the same thing as a rock crawler basically, but made by Sixth Sense. Just something else you can try, a little bit different profile, maybe a little different noise. Since the rock crawlers have been really popular. And I have the old-fashioned wiggle wort too. Those are still popular and still kicking. Still catch fish, so that's something to try. I generally go with the little more natural colors, green pumpkins, browns, and then of course the oranges and reds during the spring. Another thing to try is a jerk bait. Still works really good all the way up. Jerk baits work good pretty much year round if you really want to get into it, different cadences and stuff like that. But they still really excel in the springtime in the Ozarks. You can throw it on your channel banks, secondary points. Basically, all these baits are ideally the same areas, just a little bit different techniques to catch them. So I like the kind of flashy clown colors when it gets a little bit dingier water. Ideally, you don't want the water to be too dirty when you're throwing a jerk bait, but this has good flash and stuff to help stand out a little bit. Later on, as you get quite a bit closer to the spawn, say the water is getting close to the 60-degree mark, I like to start throwing buzz baits, especially in the shallow pockets. Yeah, you're getting up on the shallow pea gravel banks. There's any laydowns, rocks, things like that you can start to physically see. I like to throw buzz baits. This is just a Strike King Elite, one of my favorite ones. This is a crocodigator. I like to throw the white a lot of times in the spring. Here's just a little smaller crocodigator, black and gold, but that's something you can get into. And really, there's so many other baits you can throw in the spring. You're opened up to throwing lipless crankbaits. You can throw creature baits, brush hogs, and stuff like that. As the water gets a little bit warmer. On wobble heads, you can throw Ned rigs, you can throw shaky heads. There's a ton of different things. So like winter fishing, I feel like is kind of limited. You've got an arsenal of baits. You've got maybe 8 or 10 things that you can kind of go with. It's slightly varied, and then it comes pre-spawn and getting closer to the spawn, it just opens up even more, and you can really just fish your total strengths and fish what you really, really want to do. So overall, I hope just watching this helps you understand the transitions better for bass during the pre-spawn, kind of what they're thinking, where they're going, and helps you get ahead of the fish a little bit better. And hopefully, you catch more fish than you ever have before and catch the biggest fish, hopefully, of your life during this pre-spawn period. So thanks for watching, and we'll definitely have a lot more videos coming out throughout the spring, and throughout the summer we'll have some other good ideas for you guys.